Homes with children can get out of order easily, but a house full of homeschoolers takes that to a whole new level. Today, we're talking about the fact that Jesus doesn't care about your messy home, and we're here with the author.
Welcome to Homeschooling Saints, the podcast that helps you create the homeschool you love for the people you love. Our host is Lisa Mladinich, a Catholic life coach, TV host, best-selling author, and an instructor at Homeschool Connections.
Before we get started, remember to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, click the bell to join our channel. Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa Mladinich, your host, and today I'm co-hosting with Kaitlin Zara, which if you've been listening to the show, you know is going to be our new host for Season 7. So we're going to have a really fun conversation today with Dana White, who's here with us, and you're going to get a proper introduction in just a moment. She's our very special guest to help us talk about the pressure we put on ourselves as homeschooling moms to maintain perfect homes in the midst of it all.
Hi, Lisa, and hi, Dana. We are welcoming Wall Street Journal best-selling author Dana K. White to the show today to talk about her new book, Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy Home. We're going to be talking about finding peace with the mess, letting go of the guilt, and embracing the grace in our homes and our homeschooling lives. Dana, I am so excited that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is really fun.
Yeah, we're going to have a great time. And I'm just going to come out and say it as a homeschooling mom myself. I have 2 little boys. And at my home, I am a cook in a 24-hour diner. I am a homeschooling mom. I'm the principal. I've got the manpower of a full janitorial crew to clean my house. And as we are doing lessons and cooking, there is cleaning throughout the entire day. Mm-hmm. I feel like I am cleaning constantly. And I have to ask you, if Jesus doesn't care about my messy home, why do I care so much to keep it perfectly clean?
Well, you care because it's important to you. And, the point of Jesus doesn't care about your messy house is not that he doesn't care about what you're concerned about or what you're doing or anything like that. The reason for the somewhat blunt title is that we can't get it mixed up. Right? Like we cannot get this mixed up as the thing that God is demanding of us or looking at us and being disappointed in us because of our messy house, because there's just a lot of pressure that we either put on ourselves or maybe other people have put on us and maybe have used some religious sounding encouragement that then for the person who struggles in their messy home, which is my story, that is me. This is the least natural thing in the world to me, to have an orderly home. And because I grew up as a Christian, because I had these ideas that somehow for Christian women, this was supposed to be easy, it made me feel like, okay, I already feel like a failure in my home. And it also ended up feeling like a spiritual failure for me. So I wanted to write this book to just take that away. Let's talk about what the Bible actually says about cleanliness, about organization, all of those things, so that we can remove that shame, realize that Jesus doesn't care about my messy house. When he looks at me, he sees his own righteousness, what he's already done for me. It's not what I am doing. There's no way I can earn my way to his love. He already, has given me his love and his grace.
That's so beautiful and so true. And I think, just like you said, there's these societal norms, this idea that we have to be that wife and that mother that keeps everything so perfect that the home almost looks like a staged, unlived in home. Now, social media has certainly compounded that and made it worse for a lot of women. How can we start to release some of that guilt or that shame about having the full sink and, the messy bedroom with all of the unfolded laundry? How can we start to release some of that?
Well, I think, the thing for me, so my story is that I wanted to be a writer. My house was a disaster. I thought I need to get my house under control before I start writing. Well, I couldn't get my house under control. It had been a lifelong struggle, always. Like I thought it was going to be easy at the next phase of my life when I got married. It wasn't easy at that point. I thought it was going to be easy once I had kids. It was not easy. In fact, it's harder once you have kids, right?
Yeah.
So I had put off starting to write because I wanted to get my house under control, and I still couldn't do it. So in a moment of prayer, of me just saying, God, why have you not answered my prayer? Why have you not made me organized like I have begged you to do? I just really felt God's guidance to just write about that. Now, I thought it was going to be temporary. It was anonymous when I started because I thought I would write about getting my house under control for a couple of months, and then I would write about other things that I felt competent to write about. Instead, God showed me that this is how my brain works, and it's on purpose. Like, He created me to think differently than those who are naturally gifted at this stuff, right? Like, so most people who write about organizing are writing about it because they like it,
Yeah.
because it's something that is fun and interesting to them. And somebody who likes organizing, their brain works very differently from mine. So I was always lost when I was reading these, strategies or advice from people, but I was like, but my house is a mess and their house is great. So they must know what they're talking about. What is wrong with me? That's what it felt like. Right. And so as I started writing and figuring out how to actually get these things done in my home with my unique brain, I realized, the thing I need to do is accept the way that God created me, not to say, oh, well, who cares if my house is messy, but instead to give myself the freedom to figure out ways that do work for me the way that my brain is created, and stop feeling like a failure because the other ways that other people who God created to think differently, that works for them. Like, if that doesn't work for me, it's not all over. There's actually hope, right? So that shame that came from all those years of trying the ways that other people said should work and those not working, I needed to let go of that by accepting how my brain is created. And then that freedom from shame gave me the freedom to actually move forward the way that I had always wanted to. It just didn't look like I expected it to look.
Yeah, may I
I think
comment
that's
on
so
that?
cool. Yeah.
I think it's really exciting that God spoke to you in words because you're a word person. You're a natural writer and you had a longing to communicate, right? You wanted to write. And He spoke to you into that place and affirmed that. And once you started writing, when we operate in our natural talents, it does a beautiful thing to our brains. We get an endorphin payback and our energy and motivation come up. So guess what? We can handle the challenges around the things that we don't do naturally well when we're doing the things that feed our souls, when we're operating out of God's beautiful and unique design of our being. And so I just love what I'm hearing, Dana, that there was an embracing of your natural wiring that happened prior to all of this.
And I know, I was going to say I firmly believe, but I know that God placed the desire to write in my heart and made me desperate enough to write about it, that I would write about this topic, which is literally the last thing I would have ever written about. The fact that, this is my first spiritually focused book. My first 3 books are how to get your house under control, how to declutter. I have a unique decluttering process that I've developed. I'm like, my mother laughs about it every day, she says. When she thinks about the fact that this is what I do for a living, is I teach people how to get their house under control, me of all people. But that's the beauty of God's design, is that he gave me he answered my prayer. He let me write the way that he had given me the desire to write. And it's so much more satisfying when I'm doing it from a place of honesty, from a place of, that's why I didn't want to write when my house was out of control, because I felt like I would have to hide it. And that is against my personality. I'm just not, I was like, I don't want to live in fear that someone is going to find out what my house looks like and be like, wah! Where it never occurred to me that I could just write about that, write about the thing and not hide it. I mean, I did use a fake name in the beginning, but that was because it was my deep, dark secret. I didn't tell anybody I knew what I was doing. I didn't even tell my husband in the beginning that I
This
had
is
started this
riveting.
blog.
Can I just say this is like riveting to me? This is amazing. So cool. Dana, I think what you're saying is such a beautiful testament to God's plans being better than our own. And
Absolutely.
I listen, when this show wraps up, I have so many questions for you about what you were going to write about. I am so interested in everything that you're saying. And, I feel so similar to the way that you did about, the house being messy. And, a lot of moms, myself included, we feel like we cannot get to bed and close our eyes and put our heads down on that pillow until like the sink is cleaned out or the kitchen counters are wiped down. And sometimes that's like, it's not always the best thing for us. Sometimes we need to get that rest and stop. We don't have to be perfectionists when it comes to our houses. How can I need some good practical tips for how to kind of first break that that mindset, but then some practical tips of what should we be doing? What can we do to feel like we've cleaned up at night and we're reset for the next day?
Well, I do have to clarify that I am the person who can sleep like a baby with dirty dishes in the sink. I mean, like that was my problem. It literally would not cross my mind until the next morning I walked into the kitchen and went, oh my goodness. Like I never even noticed it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be frustrated because I was like, I wish I couldn't sleep without doing the dishes. But I also know that from your perspective and from the perspective of so many people, that's its own weight on the other end, which is the reason we need to get down to the actual things that matter. And I think that is what the key was for me is people would talk around this issue a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, I feel like I'm doing what you're doing. I would maybe set an alarm or whatever to try to remind myself to do this thing. Well, guess what? I can ignore like nobody's business an alarm, right? So I had all these different ways, but what it came down to when I started, I was so overwhelmed in my home that I was like, I just know that other people whose homes are under control, their kitchens never look like mine. Like I felt like every time I went to clean my house, I would start in the kitchen. Well, it would take me 5 hours because I was so behind because I'd put off doing the dishes because of all these logical reasons of I don't have enough time right now. And now, oh my goodness, there's so much. Oh, I don't have time right now. Like all these things would go through my head and it would just go on. And so I said, I'm just going to start doing the dishes every day. Well, what's funny to me is this is my thing I teach. I'm like, if you don't know what else to do, do the dishes. If you can only do one thing, do the dishes. If like the place to start is incredibly powerful. The understanding the things that move you forward is incredibly powerful. So this is what's so funny about what God's done, right? Is I come at this from, the completely overwhelmed and my house was a disaster. And then I hear from people who are like, okay, for me, I needed to know, just tell me the thing I have to do. But then I also hear from others who can't stop cleaning. And they're like, it also is really important to know what is the thing that has to be done. Because otherwise I can keep going and keep going and keep going. But I'm like, if you will either give yourself permission to, or understand the power of this is the core habit, which means I may not be able to get everything done. I may be able to let everything go or let a few things go, but knowing which are the things that at the expense of anything else need to be done, do the dishes, do a 5-minute pickup. Okay. And that's hard for some people. That was hard for me from the perspective of my house was a disaster, but I had always thought, okay, well, what's the point of doing a pickup when my house is a disaster? Shouldn't I get everything cleaned up and then maintain it with a pickup? Well, the everything was too overwhelming, so I never did it. So I never got anywhere. When I gave myself permission to say 5 minutes, I'm going to do a 5-minute pickup. It's not going to get everything done, but I'm going to do that. My house started to change immediately. So from the same perspective of like, okay, this is overwhelming to me. I'm going to give myself permission, take also the intensive research that Dana has done in her home and the people who follow me and go, okay, I'm going to give it 5 minutes. And then it takes away that idea of I've got to get everything done too. I'm going to do 5 minutes. For me, that gets me started. For someone who has the perfectionist tendency, they can look at the 5 minutes and go, oh, wow, that made a huge difference. I'm okay with the 5 minutes. So it's like it takes it from both angles and gives me the actual things that I need to focus on. Like, because I know I've heard people talk about, I'm sure you've heard of the shiny sink, right? Which is awesome. And if that's what helps you, that's exactly what you should be doing. I always tell people, don't change to my way if what you're doing is working. But when people would tell me that I had to have here's a better example. Making my bed, right? Like a lot of people say you have to make your bed. Like who doesn't make their bed? What grown adult doesn't make their bed? That should be where you should start. And I was like, okay, here's the problem for that. I know from 50 years of experience that if I don't make my bed, it doesn't actually halt my life in any way. I can still go to bed at night, right? Mm-hmm. And so when people would say that, I would be like, okay, but that feels like a should as opposed to a have to. What's the actual have to? Doing the dishes is the have to. Keeping the dishes done. So that, because if I don't do the dishes, things grind to a halt. I can't make dinner. I can't clean my house because I'm catching up on that stuff first. So it's this mindset shift into let's really narrow down to the things that actually matter. And then if I have additional time and energy, I can go on from there and make so much progress. But even if I don't, I know the thing that needs to be done. And there's just so much power in that. I don't know if that's making any sense or not, but.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kaitlin.
No, I would definitely say, Dana, I completely agree with you about the bed being made, because as homeschoolers, I know a lot of moms are listening. They're going to be nodding along with me. We get back in bed mid-morning to read a book to our kids. We just gather them and throw them in, and we open up that book when we need a read aloud that's going to calm our kids down after a lot of stimulation in the morning. And that bed gets messy again. So I couldn't agree with you more on that point about making the bed in the morning.
I mean, it's a good thing. Like, of course, it's a good thing. Of course, I feel better. Of course, I like the look of it of course, I enjoy getting into the bed after it's been made. And yet, it's so important to boil it down so that we don't get caught up in all the things we could be doing or should be doing and say, this is it. But ultimately, this is what, the book about the spiritual side of this is what actually does matter. Well, what actually matters in my relationship with Jesus is not the state of my home. I talk in the book about what Jesus actually said about cleanliness. And it's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, right? So Jesus comes to this point where it's really the first time that he gets very frustrated with the religious leaders. Okay. Like he has confronted them before, but he really gets frustrated and flat out calls them hypocrites and says, you are doing damage because of the rules that you're weighing people down with. And the thing that triggers that is their criticism of his disciples over not washing their hands before they eat. Now, we can all agree that we should wash our hands before we eat, right? I mean, like, it is by definition, that is a great thing. But Jesus' point is, don't make it a spiritual thing. There can be all these great things, but when we go, okay, well, if you don't do your dishes before you go to bed, then that's a spiritual failing. Well, that is getting people off track from what it is that Jesus is looking for. And this was the moment. This was the thing that triggered him really calling out their hypocrisy. And I think that the reason that the reason that God chose to use that as the example was because it is a good thing. And that is where our heart can get off track, is when we think that all these things I'm doing are the things that are pleasing God, as opposed to understanding who God is, which means that I understand there's nothing I can do to please God. It's only what he's done for me, right?
And I love where he takes it too. He talks about the cup on the outside looking clean while the inside is full of corruption. And
You're
so you're
focusing on the
exactly
wrong
what you're
thing.
saying.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the interior life.
Yes.
And then that flows out. But I love what you're saying about what's most important and really drilling down on that. I remember a friend of mine years ago when the kids were young, she always had the perfect little house, and she could take an old jelly jar and throw a few wildflowers in it and always looked perfect, right? She had like a Pinteresty house. And one day we were just upstairs. I was helping her with some laundry or something, and I watched her make her bed. And she literally just grabbed the sheet and the bedspread and just went like flipped it a little bit and just smoothed it. It took her less than 3 seconds. And she looked at me and said, I've never been a hospital corners kind of a person. And I was brought up that way. And so I was never making the bed because it was too complicated and it had to be too perfect. And I watched this person who felt good in her home do something super simple that didn't have to be perfect.
My friend that I met through blogging years and years ago, she's a homeschool mom of 8, and she was hilarious. And she would say that people would ask her, how do you manage your home when you have 8 kids? And she would say, oh, it's easy. I just don't fold underwear. Like, that was her thing. But her point was exactly what you were saying, is she was like, I don't do it the perfect way because I don't have time to do it the perfect way. I don't fold underwear, which I'm like, people fold underwear.
I used to do that.
Pointless to me. but you're right. Like, just do the basics. Like, figure out what the basics are, and they're going to be different for different people. But except that dishes are always the most basic for like, it is the thing that has to be done, right? But maybe it is for your stage of life or a unique time in life where you're under extra stress. You go, okay, we're going to use paper plates for this month. Or, like, this is the thing that we're going to do to make it work, because the reality is I have to keep this going. And like you said, you were raised to believe that hospital corners were the thing. And we know as moms, sometimes our encouragement, we can twist it and make it seem like a moral issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a spiritual issue. And so I don't hold it against anyone who's made it seem that way, because I understand as a mom that when you're desperately trying to get your kid to do the right thing, sometimes you can say something that might be taken the wrong way. But that's where this book comes in, is like, let's have the conversation. Let's make sure that we have that conversation so that we don't have any remaining incorrect ideas about what it is that God's looking for from us. Let's talk about what it is that he wants from us versus these things that are great and good thing. Yes, let's wash our hands before we eat, but let's also don't make it a spiritual issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And Dana, I love that you touched on some scripture. So we're going to take a quick break from our sponsor. And when we get back, Lisa really, and I too, we both want to know about that Proverbs 31 woman. So we are here again with best-selling author and author of the new book, Jesus Does Not Care About Your Messy Home, Dana K. White. We're going to take that quick break from our sponsors. You don't want to miss what we have next.
Hi, I'm Walter Crawford.
And I'm Maureen Whitman.
We are the co-founders of homeschoolconnections.com and proud sponsors of the Homeschooling Saints podcast,
which is here to help you homeschool more joyfully, more easily, and more effectively.
We want to thank you for listening.
And we invite you to check out our courses at homeschoolconnections.com.
And now, back to our program.
We are back from our break. We're with Dana K. White, author of the new book, Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy Home. So we are excited to hear, Dana, Lisa, and I really want to hear about this Proverbs 31 woman.
Yeah. We get this image, Dana, that she had a perfect home. I mean, she did a lot of amazing things. And everyone, I think, should read Proverbs 31 because it really takes us out of the superficial, but it does put a lot of pressure.
Well, it's interesting because I talk to women, a lot of women, honestly, who are scared to read Proverbs 31 because of the fear it's going to make them feel like they're not doing enough, that it's, they're a failure, because it's supposed to be the perfect woman, right? So, or at least that's the way it's looked at. And when I was, starting to work on this book, I knew the phrase cleanliness is next to godliness is not in the Bible. But I just Googled, is cleanliness next to godliness in the Bible? And the answer for most of the blurbs, okay, so not even clicking through, what would show in the blurbs for the answers were posts, articles that said, no, the phrase is not in the Bible, but the idea is there. And then it would go on to cite the Proverbs 31 woman. And I was like, okay, well, let's tackle this head on, because that was the goal of the book, so tackle it head on. Well, when you go through Proverbs 31, guess what it literally never mentions? Cleanliness, clutter, organization, tidiness, not even in any of the other words that people, use for this idea of cleanliness, right? Order, nothing like that. And the reality is that the woman in Proverbs 31 who's described, who's very resourceful, she loves her family, she's a businesswoman, she is constantly working and doing things, she reminds me very much of the women who I know and who I have met through this job that I do on the internet who struggle with clutter. She is the person that you call on when you need a big job done. Well, I have a friend who does not struggle with clutter at all. In fact, she has the opposite. She's like, I wish I could bring groceries home and not have to put every last little thing away. The way that I'm like, I put away the cold stuff and then I, 3 days later, I'm like, oh, oops, those things, if I've been tripping over this stuff for a week. But, so we're very different. And we were talking one time and she, I'm the person who there's a huge event that you need organized. People are going to ask me and I'm like, yes, great. And she's like, I could never do something like that because I don't know when I would get all my other stuff done. And I was like, well, that never even crosses my mind so I'm willing to jump in and do the big thing because it never crosses my mind. Oh, when am I going to do my dishes? Where in her mind, she's like, how could I do that? I've got to do my dishes, So the differences between us is that, and the reality is that the reason people assume that her house was perfect is that it is very clear in Proverbs 31 that she was not lazy. And the assumption is that the only reason for a messy house is laziness. And I'm here to tell you that is not true. That is absolutely not true. It is not for lack of trying. It is not for lack of wanting. Of course, laziness can be a factor in many situations, but the women who are coming to me and who are looking for, how can I get my house under control? They're not lazy. I mean, like I did a survey of the people who follow and who highly identify with the way that my brain works and the strategies that I give and that feeling of being overwhelmed in your home. And these are highly successful, intelligent women, members of Mensa, tons of PhDs, lots of, we're talking like scientists and I mean like all sorts of highly successful women who struggle in their homes and are extra bewildered because like me, one of the reasons I was so bewildered over my home was I was like, I'm an intelligent person and I can put my mind to something and do it more than other times, people can do sometimes, I don't want to be like, whatever, and therefore the state of my home was such a source of shame because I was like, why is this thing that's not even supposed to be that hard, like completely impossible for me? This doesn't make any sense with what I'm able to do in other areas of life. Why is this thing of all things so difficult? Right. And so I really dive in that chapter where we talk about why it feels like cleanliness is next to godliness, why it feels like this is a spiritual issue because of stuff like that. And yet let's go into how our brains are made differently. And let's, that it is never, my issue was I didn't know which things moved the needle. I was trying to treat my house the way that I would treat directing a play. I can direct a play with 300 people in it and be highly organized at that task more than other people can, because I know exactly what to do, how to plan it out. Everybody's going to know exactly when they're supposed to be at rehearsal, what they're going to be doing at that rehearsal, and everything all the way through the very end. I would try to apply that, my wheelhouse, to my house, and it didn't work, right? Because I would be like, well, I'm going to clean it from top to bottom till I'm completely exhausted. And then it would go right back to being a disaster because I hadn't actually decluttered and gotten all the stuff out of my house. I was just trying to, anyway. So it's that idea that it must be the result of laziness, which I just tackle head on, because that's, in most cases, that is not what's going on.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Dana. That's such a great look at Proverbs 31. Yeah. So Kaitlin, take us into the next part of this.
The thing that I keep going back to in my mind, it's just like a resounding gong, is this 5 minutes of picking things up. I'm just loving that. And I've been doing it in my own home. And like I said, us homeschooling moms, you go from one lesson, you've got to keep it rolling and go to the next thing before your kids kind of lose interest and motivation. And I always say that you can do it all, but not all at once. And I am torn, Dana, between, do I clean up that science experiment or do I just move on to writing and let the mess sit? So you gave that great tip of the 5-minute kind of sweep of the house. I need some more quick, fast tips. I need some practical tips for us moms. What are some other great things we can do to just keep order a little bit during the day?
Well, so I talk about the container concept. The container concept is something that naturally organized people are born knowing. People like me are like, what? Like, who? What? Oh, anyway, basically, I thought containers were for putting things in. Turns out that is not what they are for. They are actually meant to serve as a limit, which means the container makes the decision for me about how much I can keep. Like you said, something you said about would do anything. But I always tell people, you can keep anything, but you can't keep everything. I didn't understand that there was a limit to how much stuff was going to fit in my space and my space be functional. And so when I view every space in my home as a limit, it naturally sorts out what is important enough to deserve space within my home and what is not important enough. And I know I personally did not homeschool, but I talk to so many homeschool moms, right? Like, it is a big part of my audience. And so we have this conversation all the time. And I know every single thing to you could be useful, right? Because you could use it in a lesson. You could use that. That is very much my personality, and was the reason my house is a disaster. Was I was always, other people thought it was trash and I thought it was a treasure, because I was like, oh, I could do something with that, right? Mm-hmm. So letting the natural boundaries within my home help me make those decisions was incredibly powerful. So I always put things in, assign something a home according to, not logic, because logic didn't work for me, but instead according to instinct. If I needed this item, where would I look for it first? So what is the place in your homeschool area, or if you don't have a homeschool area and you just have storage in certain places, where would you look for this item first? Where would you look first for your science experiment supplies? Okay. Go to that space and acknowledge the reality of that space. This is the cabinet that we have for science experiment stuff. We could keep storage units worth of stuff and justify it if our only question was, could this ever be useful for a science experiment? Mm-hmm. But that is making it harder to live in our home. And because you're in your home all the time, you really want your home to be functional, right? So instead you go, what space do we actually have for this? And then we let that space determine which things deserve to stay. And so when you look at your stuff that way and you say, okay, I'm going to put the most useful, important thing. I'm not saying that these other things aren't useful. I'm not saying they're not important, but I'm saying I'm going to put the most important thing, the most useful, I could use it for the most things in first into this space. And then I'm going to put the next most useful in, and I'm going to fill this space first with the things that deserve the space the most. It naturally sorts out, and I'm not making value decisions about every single item, because when I was making value decisions, I would pick up a broken crayon and I was like, well, broken crayons still color, y'all. Like, like, of course, like we could melt them into something. We could, make a rainbow crayon. We could do all these really cool things with it. And that is all true. And yet, if I keep every broken crayon, then my house is full of broken crayons and all the other things that I'm keeping. And when I actually do have a use for that, I don't know where it is. It's too overwhelming to me. And the reality is that I feel so overwhelmed all the time by all the stuff and it just being out of control that the likelihood of me melting crayons is so low. Right? Because it's exceeded my bandwidth, and I'm not able to actually do the thing that I was saving all this stuff to do. So the container concept is letting the containers make the hard decisions for you.
I love it. It speaks right to the homeschooler's heart, especially for those of us who might be doing a little bit of spring cleaning in the coming months and coming weeks. And I think to your point, Dana, it's a great way to limit what our kids bring home. Us homeschoolers, we go on these great nature walks, and our kids want to pick up every shell and rock and leaf. And having a designated bin or a container that's not really for storage, but for setting, hey, this is how much of whatever it may be you can keep. What a great way to kind of lay that foundation for our own children to start to, create these habits too.
Well, and it helps so much because we don't have to have the conversation about, is this a good rock? Right? Mm-hmm. Because their view of this rock and my view of this rock, we're seeing two completely different things.
Yeah.
So if I say, this is not a good rock, well, then they're just going to want to hold on to it more, right? Like it becomes this power struggle and value decision and all that. But instead, when the container is the bad guy, when that's the limit, I get to always be the good guy. You love that rock? Of course you can keep it. Put it in the container that we have for, or put it on that shelf that we have for rocks. Oh, there's no room for it. Oh, okay. Absolutely. Yeah. Just what are you willing to get rid of to make room for the rock? Oh, you don't want to get rid of anything? Yeah, that's hard. Okay, well, but then we have to get rid of the rock. Oh, you love that rock. Okay, absolutely. Yes, just pick something that you can get rid of so that there's room for it. See how it allows them to make the decision. You're honoring what's important to them, but there's boundaries on it that keep us all in a situation where we can function in this space.
I love this. You might have seen, if you're watching this on YouTube and not listening, my eyes are just opening wide because this is so great. What you said about not being the bad cop, that, this system just works so beautifully. I love this. I think this is great. Really great stuff.
Yeah, and it takes out judgmentalism and puts in good judgment. It helps develop their thinking skills. Hey, we're going to run out of time soon, so I want to get you to define a couple of amazing terms in your book. Give us the quick definitions of deslobification and clean-splaining.
It's so funny because deslobification is one of those words that because I was writing as I was getting my house under control, I wasn't teaching anything, but people were reading it. And I think I said it at some point and people just like latched onto it and they were like, deslobification, that's my favorite word ever. And so I just own it. I'm like, this is basically what it is. This is my deslobification process. And I've shared that with the internet.
So this is your patented process of deslobification. Just want everyone to know that. It belongs to Dana.
Yeah. So as far as clean-splaining goes, I talk a lot in the book about what is helpful versus what isn't helpful. And a lot of times when someone does not understand the reason, like we were talking about, it is not a result of laziness. It is not a result of not wanting your house to be under control. And yet, for the person who doesn't struggle in this way, and to them, they're like, well, I just do it because I have to, I just do it because that's what you're supposed to do. It can feel like it's helpful to say, well, if your house if you didn't have so much clutter, then you wouldn't, you wouldn't have to be searching for your shoes all the time. Well, that's not actually helpful. Right? Like,
right.
But what am I supposed to say when my house is cluttered? How am I supposed to be like, well, here's the reason that's not helpful, because I can't say anything because their house is clean and mine's not. And so it's like, okay, I'm just supposed to take it, but it's not actually helpful. It's cleansplaining. It's, just basically stating facts as if that's supposed to be helpful. And where I come in is I'm like, I know that that's not helpful because hello, we all know that, right? But instead, okay, so what do I do? That's why I have my 5-step no mess decluttering process, because I need actual strategies. Don't just tell me all the shoulds and the whys and all that. When I speak, I always usually say things like, I'm not here to convince you that you have clutter, because if you show up to a speaking event that has decluttering in the title, I know you already know that you have clutter. Like, you want to declutter. And when somebody is like trying to explain to you that decluttering is a good thing, and you're like, I know, that's why I'm here, it makes you feel like they think I'm dumb, right? Like that it must just be that I don't get it. It's like, no, I get it. I don't know how. And so that's where I come in with the actual how to do the thing.
Dana, this has all been so helpful. I am especially loving, again, that 5-minute wrap up. Definitely, our listeners, get your kids involved. I think that would be so great too. That's really what I'm taking away as a practical, fabulous tip. And also the blessing of a messy home. The blessing of a messy home with kids who fill it and help us make that mess. Dana, what are your final thoughts? What's on your heart that you can share with our listeners before we close out?
Well, I just want to reiterate that Jesus doesn't care about your messy house, but he does care if you're hurting over your messy house. And I just want to share that there is hope. Like, there's hope. There's a reason why I wrote this book now, because I've already shared the how to get your house under control. And now it was time to share the spiritual side of that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
So good, Dana. Thank you for taking the time with us today. We kept you a while, but we've been enjoying you so much. Everybody, look in the show notes for the link to buy Dana's book, Dana K. White, Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy Home. Am I saying that correctly, or is it messy house?
It's house, but it's house. I'm sure you'll find it either way.
Jesus doesn't care about your messy house. Okay, he loves you. And we have just loved our time with you, Dana. Everybody, thanks for taking the time to be with us today. And Kaitlin, Zara, thank you for getting us ready for this just great conversation with Dana. And all of you, please have a great day in the Lord, and please pray for us. We're praying for you too. God bless. And that's our show for today. Our program is sponsored by homeschoolconnections.com. Be sure to subscribe to Homeschooling Saints and leave us an honest review. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.